Yep, this is definitely never going to get made. So, while I ponder whether or not to make that video eventually, I'll probably save it for maybe the 100 subscriber special, I thought, why not talk about something a bit more positive, a bit more encouraging? So, what better thing to do than to talk about something which I've not really discussed yet? And let's talk about classic Doctor Who. Okay, so I guess to start off with, I'm just going to explain my actual personal view of Classic Who. I, until the pandemic, hadn't actually watched Classic Who. And I think I've explained this before. If I haven't, I'll just run through it. I hadn't watched Classic Who at all. The only real stories I'd seen, I think, just Tomb of the Cybermen and the TV movie. And the TV movie I'm not counting in this. I kind of view it as a separate entity entirely. But I had seen Tomb of the Cybermen and nothing else. And I do like Classic Who. I do like it. But it just took me a while to actually get into it. But COVID was the kind of kick up the backside where I suddenly had a lot of time on my hands and I started watching the POCTOR era. And I'll talk about stuff like that further on. But I started with the Third Doctor and I watched a lot of it and I binged the majority of Doctor Who over the course of 2020 or 2020. Yeah, I should have called it 2020. Why did I say that? Anyway, moving on. Yeah, that's how it went for me. So starting it did take a while, and I understand why. It's really daunting because it's just a ton of content which just happens. It's 26 seasons of television, and it's massively different to what you're watching now. But I think it's very rewarding. I think it's very good, and a lot of it is high quality. Obviously, there's issues with accessibility, and you don't want to have to buy a ton of DVDs. Now, actually, as of late, they're releasing the collection box sets, which obviously I have. Some of them in standard collection, which is only just about 30 quid, pretty reasonable. And you get them in Blu-ray, you get extra content, and you get all the episodes from the seasons they release. And then, of course, you've got like individual box sets, some like separate box sets, which are like Cybermen and Dalek box sets and stuff, which you can buy as well. If you don't want to be buying lots of DVDs, and you want to binge it, if you want to binge classic Doctor Who, I would recommend getting BritBox, because you would get pretty much all of Classic Who, all the remaining episodes, obviously. Daleks Master Plan isn't on there for obvious reasons, on that site. And you can just watch all that. And I think it's $5.99 a month. That's what I pay, at least I have BritBox. I know it's a bit odd, I've got BritBox and DVDs. But yeah, I use both. But if you want to just do that, yes, that's simple. Get BritBox, you'll be able to do that. That is easy. But if you actually start watching Classic Who, where will you start watching it? When, more particularly? What era do you start with? What Doctor do you start with? And it's a weird thing to answer. Obviously, a lot of people who ask this question say, why don't you just start with the first Doctor? Start with the very first episode and just keep going. Now, yeah, I think you can do that. It will take you a bloody while. I mean, with me, I kind of, with Classic Who, binged, but I got to a point where I just took my time with it. There was times when I'd hit an episode and I wouldn't be able to just watch the next one. It took me weeks to watch an episode. For example, Terminus, which is in season 20, I spent so long on Terminus. I think I watched part 2 and I just didn't know what the hell was going on and I didn't really understand. My mind blanked and I just stopped watching it for about 3 weeks. And then I came back and finished it. And that happens with a few stories. And there's a few I've missed. Like, I've missed 1 5th Doctor story. I've missed 3 4th Doctor stories. I've missed 3 or 4 Third Doctors. The Second Doctor, I think there's like 3 or 4 I haven't seen. The First Doctor, there's a few. But yeah, with all this stuff, it's hard to pick where to begin. You can begin at the very beginning, but it's massive. And you don't have to do it in complete order. It's not exactly as serialized, even though there are serials, obviously. in the classic series, and you don't have serials in the new series. The new series follows more of a serialised continuity in the stories and arcs in New Who are much more prevalent. If you want to start in Classic Who, you could just start with any Doctor, I think, with the beginning of any Doctor's era, and just go with it. As it's very episodic, it's very, here's one story, here's another, here's another, here's another. But my personal recommendation, if you're going to start with a Doctor or an era, start off with Season 7, which is the Pertwee era, the very beginning of the Pertwee era, as it's a completely new reset. You get new companion, new Doctor, it's now in colour, different setting, it's all on Earth. Very simple, quality Who. And Season 7, you've only got 4 stories, and they're fantastic. You get, what I think, Spearhead from Space, Doctor Who and the Silurians, The Ambassadors of Death, I love The Ambassadors of Death, and Inferno, which is class. And then you can watch Season 8, which has, the first episodes of The Master, you get Joe Grant, Season 9, Season 10, and then the introduction of Sarah Jane Smith. Pertwee era is actually very good Doctor Who. I love the Pertwee era, and I'd recommend that highly. But if you want to start off with, say, the Tom Baker era, or the Peter Davison era, or the Colin Baker era, or the Sylvester McCoy, or, William Hartnell, or Patrick Troughton, go for it. But, you don't need to watch it all in chronological order. You could just watch the entire second Doctor era and go, I just fancy watching the sixth Doctor era now. Go for it. Knock yourself out. It's Doctor Who. It's your journey to watch it. Watch it how you want to. But it's all there if you want to watch it. So go for it. Now, it's now time to talk about actually why you should watch Doctor Who. Why should you watch classic Doctor Who? First of all, there are great stories in classic Doctor Who. Tons of them from each era, and they're all so different in the way each era kind of approaches storytelling. You get to see things like the origins of monsters, which in the new series. I mean, stories like the Daleks, their first ever appearance, Genesis of the Daleks, which shows their actual origins, the 10th Planet. You get to see the first appearance of the Sontarans, which is a fantastic story, the Time Warrior, and you also those are just so many great stories. You get to see so many great companions which you've missed out on. I mean, you of course, if you've watched New Who, are aware of Sarah Jane. Watch her stories. She's got fantastic chemistry with John Pertwee and Tom Baker's Doctors. Also, as I've mentioned, all these eras are so good at very different things. I really like the fifth Doctor era. It's a very big comfort era for me, personally, because there's this kind of homey dynamic. A lot of people say they argue a lot, him and his companions early on. I don't mind it, and I quite feel at home with his era. The sixth Doctor era is a little bit more rabbity. I don't know. But I'm not going to explain the sixth Doctor era. I don't know why I like certain episodes. I just do. But I can't really describe that era as a whole, because that era is quite troubled. But with the seventh Doctor era, you've got this kind of teacher-student chemistry between the seventh Doctor and Ace, and he's kind of dark underneath it with the fourth Doctor. I mean, if I could describe what's good about that era, it is literally just Tom Baker. That is the core of why that era works. The third Doctor, it is stripped back Doctor Who, unit Doctor Who, and it's brilliant, and it's so unique. The second Doctor, again, Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines, those two make his era, and they are fantastic. And the first Doctor's era is down to how, bonkers it is, and how unique it is, and how creative it is. Watch stories like the Space Museum, and how invested in their ideas they are, and how great the historicals are. You don't really get historicals that much, but in the first Doctor era they're fantastic. But that is pretty much it in terms of what you should watch. Now I'm going to talk about some key episodes. Now I'm going to mention episodes from each Doctor's individual eras, and I must say, I think all the classic Doctors are good, in very different ways. I like all of them. From William Hartnell to Sylvester McCoy, I like them. So starting off with the first Doctor era, if I could recommend you 2 stories, I've said 2 because they are, I don't know whether I was going to say 1, but these 2 are it's neck and neck as my favourite Hartnell stories. I'd recommend the Romans or the Aztecs, as they are both fantastic historicals. The Romans, obviously, he goes to ancient Rome, the first Doctor, with Ian, Barbara, and Vicky. And Vicky is a really nice companion. I really like Vicky in the episodes I've seen her in. And then in the Aztecs, it's actually in the first season. he goes with Ian, Barbara and Susan, obviously. And they're very different stories. I find the Romans to be a lot more fun. And then the Aztecs is very serious and is dictating like the consequences of time travel. And it's very good. I'm not going to talk about them too much, but please, 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 they are both very good stories. And I beg you to give them a watch. But then you've got the second Doctor era. And I'll get the obvious one out of the way, the one everyone says. Tomb of the Cybermen is every bit as fantastic as people suggest. It's the first one I ever watched, and you know, I watched this at the age of 11, and you know, I'd never really watched that much black and white stuff, but it did not matter at all. It is brilliant. Cybermen are amazing in it, and it's well worth a watch. Another one I'd suggest is The Mind Robber. It is so creative. It's such a great idea. It's the kind of thing Doctor Who would only come up with in the 60s, you know, in its very early years. It's fantastic. You know, to explain it briefly, the Doctor and his companions, which are Zoe and Jamie, end up in the land of fiction, which is kind of just exactly that. I'm not going to explain more than that, and it's so creative, it's fantastic. Please watch it, it's brilliant. After that, of course, the third Doctor, and I found this so hard to like narrow down. So I'm just going to say two stories here. Spearhead from Space, his first ever story, fantastic. Also, Terror of the Autons, brilliant. You've also got the Three Doctors, the first ever anniversary special. Also, other stories which I really like. I love The Ambassador of Death, as I've mentioned. I love Inferno, Carnival of Monsters, The Time Warrior. And then, of course, his final episode, Planet of Spiders. Not a lot of people like it. I quite like it. Now, fourth Doctor era actually contains my favourite episode of Doctor Who. Maybe not all of Doctor Who, but definitely Classic Who. City of Death. I think it's fantastic. It is one of the greatest Doctor Who episodes of all time. It is the most watched Doctor Who episode as well. It's fantastic. Go and watch it. It's genius. It's hilarious. It is great Doctor Who. Also, you've got the Seeds of Doom, which I think is brilliant. I love it in a very similar way. I think it's fun. Clearly, Sarah Jane and Doctor are having a lot of fun in this very serious scenario. And of course, as well, I can't talk about the fourth Doctor without mentioning Genesis of the Daleks. You know, the first episode to feature Davros, the actual origins of the Daleks' creation. And it's a fantastic story. Give it a watch if you haven't already. The fifth Doctor era, what would I say here? I'd probably say, if you're just starting off, watch ERRTHSHOCK. I think ERRTHSHOCK's brilliant. It involves a very big companion moment. If you know exactly what I'm saying, then you'll know exactly what I'm saying. But it does kind of pack a punch towards the end. And it is a fantastic story. It's really good. It's not quite the Cyberman story that you'd expect. Not too many conversions. But it's a very good story. And you should go into this story knowing that the Cybermen actually hadn't appeared on the show for about 10 years, I think, or about like 8 years or something. So it's a very big story. Also, if you've watched a little bit, the next one I'm going to suggest from the fifth Doctor era is the better episode, but I think you should go into it having watched some things, like, or maybe not, but it's his regeneration episode, and it's the Caves of Androzani. It is fantastic, well worth a watch, one of the best regeneration stories. I'm trying to think if I prefer any New Who regeneration stories, and the only one I can think in my head that competes with it is Parting of the Ways. Other than Parting of the Ways, this episode is better than every other regeneration episode in New Who. It's fantastic. And it's got probably one of the best cliffhangers in the entire show in part 3. But I'll let you watch that in your own time. So now, sixth Doctor era, we're nearly there. I would say I'd run it down to two stories. Vengeance on Varos, a really great story which focuses on the ideas of, you know, reality television and things like that, and how we vote. And it's very just a great story. I think Vengeance on Varos is fantastic. Another story is Attack of the Cybermen, which is a really good Cyberman story, which has conversions, and it relates to Tomb of the Cybermen as well. And I think it's a very good story. I think it's a good Cyberman story. It's a good Daleks, Doctor. It's a good Doctor Who story. A lot of people will criticise it for a moment where the Sixth Doctor performs a certain act of violence. I'm not that bothered by it, but each their own. The Seventh Doctor era now. If you're new to the show, if you're new, well, not new to Classic Who, and you're trying to get into the Seventh Doctor era, I'd recommend Dragonfire. I think Dragonfire is a very good story. It's the finale to his first season, season 24, and I think it's quite a fun ride. It's the end of one companion, it's the start of another, and it's a decent story, I'd say. Then, of course, you have other stories, and I didn't know which one to say out of here, but these are all very good stories. You've got, and this is a weird one I'm going to suggest, Survival, the final story of Classic Who. I really like Survival. I think it's a really simple, fun ride with Ace. However, I think you really should probably leave. Yeah, I'm going to say you should leave Survival until you've watched all of the Seven Doctor Zero, because you should kind of be able, you should know Ace at the point where you watch Survival. That shouldn't be your first exposure to her character. As well, the Happiness Patrol, brilliant story. Really go give it a watch. It's fantastic in the way, it is commentary on the political, where politics was at the time in England. You'll discover that as you watch it. It's fantastic. Then you've also got Remembrance of the Daleks, which is, in my opinion, the true 25th anniversary? Yeah, 25th anniversary. That is the true 25th anniversary in my head, not Silver Nemesis, which is, I think, what they went with. But Remembrance of the Daleks is fantastic in every way. And also, it's got political undertones with, racism at the time. And it's fantastic the way it does that. And yeah, that is it with me recommending Doctor Who episodes. I love them. I love even more episodes than that. I have guilty pleasures in certain areas. I love Classic Doctor Who. And I think it's brilliant. I think you should really give it a watch. But I think that's it. I really think that's it. So, if you've actually watched Classic Doctor Who, what's your favourite Classic Doctor Who episode? Comment below. If you haven't watched Classic Doctor Who and you're planning on watching it, tell me, what era you want to start with, or, ask me questions. Just talk it below. If you want to, DM me or anything, my Instagram is linked in the description and also attached to this YouTube channel. So, go there and I have updates. I might post the occasional meme or, post updates about the channel. I also did recently try out Instagram Reels, so you can see that, but it wasn't Doctor Who related. But yeah, so as I've mentioned, tell me all about, your experience with Classic Doctor Who. Like the video if you've enjoyed this. Subscribe for more content, so I will pop up in your feed whenever I upload. If you want to be notified whenever any of my videos goes out, then ding the bell for notifications. Obviously, the bell will be over there, I think. And yeah, that is it. I've been the World Whovian, and I'll see you around.